We've all heard the saying that pride comes before the fall, and it's true. When we think we are better than we are, we set ourselves up for failure. As little children, we learned this with Aesop's fable, the tortoise and the hare. You probably remember the basic outline of the story. There was a hare or a rabbit who was very fast, very proud of his speed, and there was a tortoise who was obviously not fast. And the hare boasted about how fast he could run, and he made fun of the slow-moving tortoise. One day, tired of the hare's arrogance, the tortoise challenged him to a race, and the hare, thinking it was a joke, accepted the challenge. Soon all of the animals in the forest gathered to watch the race, and as soon as the race began, the hare spun off very fast, leaving the tortoise far behind. And then we know how it goes. The hare, confident in his inevitable victory, about halfway through decided he would take a nap and rest a little bit. However, he slept longer than he had intended, and when he woke up, it was too late. The tortoise was right by the finish, and as fast as he ran, the hare could not catch up. The tortoise crossed the line, won the race, and all the animals cheered for the tortoise while the hare was humiliated. And then the tortoise looked back at the hare and he said those famous words, "Slow and steady wins the race." In our lives, pride expresses itself in many ways, like when we take personal credit for our gifts and possessions as if they had not been given to us by God, like when we glory in our achievements as if they were not primarily the result of God's goodness and grace, and when we minimize our defects and claim qualities we don't actually have. Pride causes spiritual blindness because it prevents us from seeing ourselves as we really are, and also pride leads us to magnify and dwell on the defects of others. To one degree or another, each of us carries pride, but there are remedies, like sincerely knowing ourselves and being able to acknowledge our shortcomings and faults, like accepting the humiliations that come our way as a part of life, and also prayerful communion with God. Because God is always the first mover in not only our lives, but our spiritual lives. Everything starts with God, and ultimately, everything is going back to God. Everything we have and everything we are comes from God. It all begins with Him. And this is a key to overcoming our pride and growing in humility, and it's a lesson that Jesus teaches us in today's gospel. We are continuing to read from the Bread of Life discourse in the 6th chapter of St. John's Gospel. And it opened with the Jews murmuring against Jesus because many of them cannot accept that He is the bread come down from heaven. So Jesus says to them, and He says to us, "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draw him." This is an important fact about our spiritual lives. We respond to the graces that God gives. God acts first, and we respond. This very fact should deflate a lot of our pride, because everything we have in are gifts from God. Nothing that we have cooked up on our own, but all gifts from God. So, on our own, we are nothing. Even the things that we seem to have are ultimately God's gifts. So, of ourselves, we cannot advance in God's service or friendship or love. We can only advance when it's God who first draws us. I remember once when I was in seminary, and obviously there have been many times since, I felt dry in my spiritual life But on this particular occasion, I was taking a walk after dinner, and as I walked, I saw a stick on the path that had fallen from a tree, and I picked up the stick, and as I held it in my hand, I noticed how dry and dead it was. And then as I looked at the stick, I remembered that on my own, cut off from God, I am nothing. To have joy, love, peace, and happiness, we have to be connected to Him. And thankfully, there is a special food that connects us to Him: the Eucharist. As Jesus says, "I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever, and the bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world." By coming to Mass, we take the focus off of ourselves and we respond to God's grace. And we should always remember it is He who draws us first. We didn't just decide to come to Mass all on our own. That very movement was a working of His grace. And at Mass, the little that we have is represented by the bread and the wine that we offer. And what does God do with the bread and the wine? Well, He takes it, He blesses it, and then He gives it back to us as something infinitely better: the body, blood, soul, and divinity of His Son, our Lord, Jesus Christ, which we receive as Holy Communion. When we receive Jesus in Holy Communion, we come to Him with nothing, but He gives us everything. And it's good to note, Jesus doesn't come to us in a prideful, a boastful, or an overpowering way, but as a little piece of bread. So small, so delicate, and so humble, so that if we don't look at it with the eyes of faith, we could miss that He's all-powerful and almighty. So there's only one way that we can receive Him fruitfully, and that's when we approach Him with humility, knowing that it was He who draws us first and that we are totally dependent on Him.